Welcome back to the Parc Fermé for podcast number 744. Oh, this is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, for your kind consideration, on podcast 745, we're going to cover what news there is in Formula One. Not all of it, but some of it. And before I do that, I obviously have to introduce my friend, my co-host, my friend of suffering my presence for all these years. She's so gracious. It's so good that it's in her name. You know her. That's right. Got to go all the way to the right coast of America, Nestor Nation's capital, where she masters like numbers and stats and then makes meaningful things out of those. She's really good at that. You know her. It's the lovely, the redoubtable Grace. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. I've been off for a week though, so we'll see how well I do at mastering that number stuff.
Oh, it's like riding a bike, Grace.
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know.
You'll be right back on the horse.
Maybe. I was thinking about other stuff. Who knows? 800 emails when I start work again, but whatever.
Yeah.
Another day. Who knows?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it just as you I don't know, as you get into the working world, and for those of you that are out there young and stuff, as time goes on in the world, it's like it gets to the point where the idea of taking a vacation or some time off is always so encouraging and you're excited about it. But as you get older, you just get severely punished when you're gone, because when you come back, there is just so much to do. And in my case, I never stop working. I work 24/7 on the weekends, on the holidays. I'm having to answer emails. There is no vacation. So it's, it's my lot in life.
I guess. I mean, I learned after last year, I had too much leave at the end of the year, which has never happened in my life before, but pandemic stuff. So
Is it a use it or lose it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I started taking half days because that's the way to balance that, right? So you work half a day and you're off half a day, so you don't get completely punished by taking a week off on a staycation. And so then I just did like local outside stuff, like went to parks and whatever. So then I still got some vacation, but I didn't feel like I was a week, where I just missed everything when I was just sitting in my house. Because it's really hard. It's really hard to be like, I'm going to miss that meeting, even though it's just upstairs, right?
Yeah. That's crazy. Oh boy. It's
my tip. Take half days.
That is a top tip. Grace.
There you go. Half days. I also think as I move towards retirement, that's what people do. Like they just, they go part-time and I'm like, I could get used to this, like a half day life. This is pretty nice because you're very productive. And then it's like, it's 1:00. I'm done now.
Yeah.
See y'all tomorrow.
So do you find that you're more productive, like if you stay up into the wee hours of the evening and work into like midnight or 1, or do you find that you're the kind of person that's much more productive if you get up super early?
That one.
I'm
terrible. After like 9:30, I'm trash. It's nothing.
Yeah.
So, but I used to do that like in college. I would take all the like 8:00 classes because nobody wants to take those. So then you get all the classes you want and you don't get hooligans in your class, which I always hated too. And then I'd come back, eat lunch with, everybody else on the floor, take a nap while they were all in class. And then you could go back out again in the evenings. Right.
There you
go. The only way I could do it. But yeah, I've always been much more a morning person. I'll get up at 4 a.m. and drive 8 hours, but some people are like, we'll just drive all night. I'm like, you'll drive all night. I'm not driving all night. That's a bad idea.
Right. Yeah. My dog ensures that now I've become a member of the Dawn Patrol. So
that is correct. That is pretty early.
At 5 a.m. and the sun's not up and, he's ready to go on his walk. He's ready to roll. Yeah. And I got like, okay, buddy, let's just back it down a little bit until twilight, we get out there, we'll start to, so.
And it's not even winter yet, man.
I know. Wait till the winter. Dark. It's going to be cold and dark. I know.
Hold on, man. I got to put on more clothes. Some of us aren't born with just, everything, right?
I know. This winter, I'm going to look like the little kid out of A Christmas Story, I can't put my arms down.
We'll just find you laying in a snow bed somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Buffy licking your face.
Exactly.
He just laid still. It was his only defense.
Yeah, like a slug. It was his only defense.
That's right.
Oh my. So Grace, so, to start off this week in some very sad news.
Yeah. Yes.
To start
Yes,
off
of course.
this week. This is really sad. So I must confess, I haven't been able to put this up on our website because we had this huge storm go through the area, and the front of that storm had like 75-mile-an-hour winds. The trees, which I've got like 60-year-old pin oaks out here, were flipping around like nothing, and so all the power practically in the city where I live is pretty much out. And then when it finally did come back on over the weekend, the interweb was out. So AT&T, I have AT&T, and so the internet was out, and they were like, yeah, we're kind of busy right now. So the first chance we'll get to be there is on Monday. So this afternoon, I finally get interwebs back up. And so then I finally saw this story just today. So I'm a day behind or so. But anyway, tragic news. 51-year-old Natalie, and I think it's Maillet, was killed in an apparent murder-suicide, according to Belgian news. Now, Natalie became the CEO of Spa-Francorchamps back in 2016. So we're talking about the CEO of Spa was killed, was murdered. And she became CEO in 2016. She was leading the 80 million euro renovation and modernization plan for the track, and they're in the middle of that. And this is really to modernize the track and really make it spectacular. And I'm just reading the news report. It said that the body was found by local police in her Luxembourg home alongside the bodies of her husband and another woman, all three showing gunshot wounds. According to the statement issued by the public prosecutor, her husband is believed to have shot and killed both women before committing suicide. And the quote in the paper was that the bodies of the two women and one man were discovered by police in a house in, I don't know how you pronounce that, something. And all three presenting gunshot wounds. According to our information, the male individual voluntarily used his firearm to kill both women, including his wife, before killing himself. So this is horrible. And, the circuit had released a statement. Obviously, they were stunned by this tragedy, and the circuit said that it's with great sadness that the team of the Spa-Francorchamps circuit has been informed of the death of Natalie, the CEO. On this very sad day, the whole staff wished to present their most sincere condolences to Natalie's family and friends. The circuit, but also motor racing, has lost today a passionate woman, strong in her convictions and always looking to the future. And then the circuit chairman said she was a true leader who will be greatly missed. My thoughts with Natalie's family, her parents, her loved ones, and her teams. And then, let's see. This was today. We're losing a highly respected lady, a true leader who will be greatly missed. Natalie had become the face of the circuit. She embodied the passion for racing that we all share. Grace, tragic circumstances. Here you have this woman that has been in racing, tried some racing herself, was an architect, I think, maybe by trade, moves into this role, loves the circuit, loves everything about it, loves racing and race promotion, and was leading a significant investment in Spa. And the reason this is so front of mind, obviously the shock of it all, but also this is the next race we go to. And it just, it's one of those things, it's just a sobering reminder that you never really know, what's going on in everybody's life,
Nope. That's right.
Yeah. It's, not just hers, but, what was going on in her husband's life, and those that orbit, the personalities in the sport.
Yes, right. You only know the tip of a person's iceberg, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So anyway, very, very sad news. And sorry I have to share that with all of you. That is certainly, I would imagine, Formula One and the FIA, ACO,
Yeah.
and the FI both
Mhm.
offered statements and were shocked. And I know Formula One is as well.
Right.
I would imagine they'll honor her at the race coming up here in Spa. So yeah, very tragic event. So let's move to other news, Grace. Big news out of the Aston Martin camp.
Big surprise. We're really
Big
shocked by this one,
surprise.
right?
I know, this is
I don't know.
Stunning.
We tipped the car over, right? Like the
Right.
last bit of ketchup that you're trying to get from the old bottle into the new bottle. And guess
Right.
what?
Yeah. So then the FIA refused to review the situation of the disqualification of Sebastian Vettel at the last Grand Prix. And the team then had a choice to make. Would they appeal the penalty,
Right.
or would they not? And they have chosen to withdraw their appeal over Sebastian Vettel's DSQ.
Right.
If you recall that the team submitted evidence to the FIA showing that the lack of fuel was caused by a fuel system failure that resulted in a leak, which was not known after the race. And the stewards said that this was not relevant to the disqualification because rules dictate that the car must have the required amount of fuel, regardless of the circumstances that may have prompted the lack of fuel at the end of the race.
We don't care.
They don't care, right?
We don't care. It's
They're
either
like,
in the
well, but
ketchup.
Grace, wait a minute. We had this sensor and there was like a grommet and then it leaked, and they're like,
It's either in the ketchup bottle or it's not.
don't care.
We don't care.
Don't care. I don't care. I don't care.
Could you imagine though if more rules were treated this way? Like, no, Christian Horner, it's either in the ketchup bottle or not. It's
Or
not.
not.
We're done talking to you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, that's what I said. In my notes, it's a great point, Grace, and thanks for backing me up on this one, because what I was going to say is, so Aston Martin, they withdrew their appeal. They said, quote, on the basis that we believe doing so outweighs the benefits of being heard.
I feel like that is like you should share that.
So rich.
You should share that with your kids. That's like a great thing to tell your parents in like PowerPoint form. Like, that's a great phrase.
On the basis that I think doing
heard.
so outweighs the benefits of being heard.
Yeah. All right. Well, do what you want, parents. That's great.
It's so I don't know. Whoever it is over at Aston Martin that wrote that statement, good on you. That was well played.
I hope it's at Marsh Staffnauer, because he seems like that kind of guy.
He seems like the kind of guy that would say that. Larry doesn't.
No,
but Otmar does.
I think he would have been like, hold on, give me a moment.
Yeah. Right.
Here's our statement.
Here's
right?
our statement. Right. Right. It's like some sort of baffling backhand to the FIA. That was great. Now, the fact is, the FIA made it clear that it doesn't matter what the excuse is, the fuel was missing at the end of the race.
Right.
And that's it. Case closed. Either fuel's in or it's not.
Right.
Right. Doesn't matter what happened. That's on you. Right. And, in a world of shifting truths, justification, accountability avoidance, and upside down logic, it's nice to know that there is a place where definitives still exist.
Yes.
Although many fans would like to see some of the other FIA regulations as definitive, or at least as consistent as they've done with this one.
And clearly, I agree 100% with that bullet point. Like,
yes.
Couldn't we just be like this with everything? Like, no,
exactly.
I'm not reading your email. It's done.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So to your point, it would be nice if everything was just this cut and dry.
Right.
Yeah.
And then people could just write snarky responses, which I am all here for. That is, you hire that guy, right? Like, hire some more people that just can come up with some like snarky stuff to send back. Right. Press release.
I just thought it was well played.
I love it.
By Aston Martin. Okay.
Fine. We'll accept it, but
yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah,
and they're going to be salty at Spa because they're going to interview, at Marsh Staffnauer, and he's just going to be like, wow, we don't like the way it is, but I guess that's what we have to do. Like, he's going to be salty. Maybe he'll be their person on the pit wall, which I love almost as much as when it's Andreas Seidel, which we're talking about so I'm going to make a basketball tangent here, but Kawhi Leonard also is notably expressionless. And so they were interviewing him, and I was like, he has the same problem that Andreas Seidel has. It's like, if you put a mask on him like here, he doesn't emote. And so he could be saying anything, or somebody else could be saying something. See, I move my eyebrows too much already. Like,
right.
So yeah, so like if you cover up the bottom half of Kawhi Leonard's face with a mask, it could be anybody speaking, because you'd never know. This part of his face never moves, which is how Andreas Seidel is as well.
Right.
But not Otmar Schnafnauer. There's a lot of eyebrow moving. That guy's really expressive. So I think that's if it's not predetermined, which it probably is, they probably pick him for any given week. But I think that would be a fun one for Spa, just to get a little saltiness.
Yeah, I agree.
Mid-pack saltiness. I enjoy that.
I agree. I thought that was well played by Aston Martin. I mean, if you're, look, they had to try to do something. They want to save that second place. That would have moved them up in the battle with AlphaTauri and the Constructors' Championship. And you want to do that. Mm-hmm. But even when you go to the FIA and say, but there was something broke, don't care. Don't want to hear it. So they were like, okay, well, whatever. Then we're not going to get anywhere with this.
Right.
Okay. Moving on. Oh, and speaking of Aston Martin, so many of you know that our dear friend Paul Charsley is the sporting manager of the number 23 Aston Martin Heart of Racing team.
Sure is.
And this year they have a film crew that is working with them and producing some terrific content. And they're doing this little documentary series that features different things in the team. And so they released the latest one, which is called Engineers versus Lime Rock. So if you go to our website, I put a post up about it, and on our Facebook page and a link to it, or you can go to YouTube and look up Heart of Racing and see the series. So in this most recent one, there's lots of Paul talking in there. You get to see Paul, doing his thing and saying his stuff, but it was really well done, and I really enjoyed it. It's not too terribly long, so if you get a chance, go check that out. Next up in the news, so DRS still, really?
You think, right? Like, this is the one hope we all have, is that with the new rules, right, that'll be it. No,
it was supposed to be. And if you saw the full-scale model of the proposed 2022 car a few weeks ago, I bet the keen-eyed amongst you would have noticed that the rear wing did not have DRS on it. But not to worry, you DRS lovers out there, don't you worry. Totally have you covered. The team bosses have decided to keep the construct for at least one season under the new regulations. So while the new cars were supposed to eliminate the need for DRS with simplified aero and more ground effects, apparently, according to Zach Brown at McLaren, keeping DRS is a good thing. And here's what, so here's why. Here's what Dak says. Here's what he says. Quote, I think from everything everyone has told me, both within my team and others, everyone thinks the new rules will work. But I think until you get it on track, you don't know. So I think to keep DRS initially is a good idea. And then I think, much like the sprint race, let's get these race cars on the track and figure out, has it worked exactly as prescribed? Do they need modification? Do they need DRS? Do we need it for a less or shorter period of time? Because I think just like the sprint race, all we're working through is data and drawings and visuals. And until we see it on track, we don't know. Everyone thinks conceptually, but what has been designed should, everyone thinks conceptually what has been designed should work, but we won't know until we get it on the track. Okay. So in the end, my comment to that is what you would know if you had real testing like we used to.
Well, yeah, but that's been years.
Yeah. But apart from that, I understand his point in that with all the best will in the world, these regulations are specifically supposed to work and make the much closer racing between the cars. But to his point, if that doesn't work, what then? So building in DRS to me is sort of a safety valve in case the new regs make little or no impact on the track. And I guess for that reason, they want to break glass in case of emergency solution, and just having it on the car is it. But I kind of feel like, okay, so what does that look like? So they show up to the first race and they all have DRS. And they immediately go out and everybody's using DRS and there's DRS. Are we really going to know if the cars and the regulations are working? So it won't be until they have DRS off and not allowed at a certain point in time that we'll be able to see if the cars can run close together. And I would imagine that the teams would ferret that out during the limited test. But,
Right.
But I kind of feel like then if it's a break glass in case of emergency, then go ahead and maybe put it on the car, but don't immediately use it, or have a wing ready that has DRS that you can use, or design the car that would have DRS, but don't just immediately right out of the gates with the new regulations start using DRS. Does that make sense? Let's just see if the cars work.
Right. Or put it on the cars, but not enable it. Right.
Right.
And then that way everybody would have it. I mean, right. Because, right. Don't you have to be like 3 laps in or something before it's enabled. Right. So you could just never enable it. And then everybody would have it. And then you could make some decision, like you were saying, like, 5 races in or whatever, if this was necessary. And that really would be a break glass if necessary. But everybody would already have the components on.
I would think, though, it would take some time for them to figure out, like he was saying, okay, well, we won't know if the new regulations are working until we get the cars on the track. And I understand his point. So let's concede that point. But on the flip side of it, he was saying, well, are they going to work? Are they going to be able to race close to each other? Are they going to be able to pass each other? Will we need DRS? Will we need DRS, but shorter DRS zones, not as long, and those kind of things?
Right.
I think it's going to take a lot of time to figure the answers out to those questions. A lot of racing and a lot of time to figure that out. Now, there's some really smart people on the data side and the analytics side of Formula One, and maybe I'm overplaying this, but I would think that it would take time to figure out, oh, you know what? Yeah, these new regulations really do need DRS because they're not working as well as we wanted them to. And they do need DRS, but they only need one DRS zone about half as long as what we've had in the past. Well, it's going to take a lot of data to figure that out.
Right. And so I think that you just have to be prepared at the start of the season, because I assume they're going to have the team principals agree to it again. Right.
Yeah. Right.
To change that if they agree, if everybody agreed, hey, we're going to start the season with DRS, you'd have to have agreement again to change any of the number of DRS zones, or we're not going to do it or whatever. So, I mean, I guess in a sense, this would prepare you, because what you wouldn't want, like, I agree with your point about let's go 5 races. I'm just using 5 without DRS, and let's see how it goes. And then we can decide, oh, just kidding, we need DRS. It's not working. But everybody has to have built those components.
Right.
So maybe that's some part of it is that if I don't tell you that I'll say Australia, who knows what the first race is going to be. But if I don't say in Australia, you'll have DRS, people won't build the components, right? They'll put that energy elsewhere. And then when we get to Spain, they won't have DRS ready, right? They won't have a back wing ready. So I wonder if that's some part of the angle is that you kind of have to start the season saying we're going to do this, because otherwise teams will wait. They won't do it. I mean, I guess I think of like when Paul Charsley said, engineers will take as long as you give them.
Right.
We talked about like how much could you shrink a weekend and still get everything done? He's like, well, they'll take as much time as you give them. Mm-hmm. So you just kind of have to cut it. So I think the same thing kind of applies. If you say we may need DRS, well, then they may not focus on that, or, maybe those parts just won't. They'll go further down the parts list, right? Or whatever, the build list, especially if you're a lower team. So maybe Mercedes doesn't have this problem, but Williams does, or AlphaTauri does, or,
So I would think that in 2022, and you're into statistics and numbers and measuring those things,
right?
I would think you'd have multiple variables at play. You've got a brand new set of regulations in aerodynamic that is simplified. You've got a ground effects package, or at least more reliance on ground effects than aerodynamic push.
Sure.
Okay. So that's the first element you've got to play. In my mind, the second element is you have an evolution of a new engine.
Right.
So you've got a new engine, new power units, different power outputs, new electric ECUs, new MGU-K, maybe even delivering more kilowatts or kilojoules. Sorry. So you've got new engine. So you got aerodynamics, new engine, new tires with lower profile, bigger rims.
Right.
And that's going to be a dramatic impact on the chassis and the aerodynamics in that car. So you have that. And then you want to throw in construct like DRS. And so here's the 4 variables that, at least off the top of my head, I'm thinking about, Grace. That's a very difficult, you have a lot of moving parts, a lot of variables involved in trying to find out the efficacy of DRS and whether you need it or not. That was standing with the other 3 variables that you're trying to measure the efficacy of those. Have we nailed the aero? Have the engines improved? Are we running the right engine and the right horsepower and the right electric? And then C, how are the tires performing? What are the windows, the heat cycle? You know what I'm saying?
I do. And I think how I would sum this up is I agree with you, but I think that it depends on how you define success. So you and I, as race fans, and people who listen to this podcast, I assume as like Anorak race fans, all those things I want to understand, I want to measure, and that's going to make good racing. But to the non-Anoraks, if nobody can pass anybody, they don't care, right?
Yep.
And so if that's your success is, can cars pass each other, then it makes sense that they want to keep on to DRS, because that is the only way they can really guarantee that you're going to have cars passing each other, even though that's the whole point of those other 4 variables you just named, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's where, because there has to be something we all joke about, like, nobody in Formula 1 agrees about anything. So that everybody agreed on this, that has to be part of the concern, is that, okay, Ross Brawn, we know all these things, they're supposed to make this all better, but if they don't, then we have to rely on what we've been using for the last 10 years to make it better.
Yeah.
By better, I mean passability, make passability better.
So am I paraphrasing correctly then, Grace, when I say that what you're sort of suggesting is, look, you have those 4 variables, which are all 4 moving targets. 3 of them are brand new, and the 4th one has been around a while, but we don't know how it will impact the other 3, right? So you have these 4 variables. At least there's probably several more.
Right.
But what you're kind of saying is, yes, but it depends on what your ultimate measure of success is on the outcome. And if the outcome is, we don't really care how we get there, what we care about is there's prolific passing in Formula 1, and we're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it right now just to make sure that all happens. And if it all happens, we don't really care if it happens because it's a combination of 18-inch wheels and a DRS, or if it's a combination of the new aero and the new lump. We really don't care. Maybe DRS isn't really making that big of an impact, but who cares? We're passing. Fans are happy. Right. Okay.
And I think it's some version, and I'm sure that because I assume this happens to everybody, but the Anorak survey designer and me will say, well, you can ask that question, Todd, but you're going to get garbage data back because people can't actually answer that question, whatever that question is. And management may say, we don't care. It's going to collect something, right? It's a success. Well, yes, any question you ask people, like the 800 Formula 1 fan surveys, they all collected data. And so if you're only looking at response rates, how many people filled out my survey and did they give me data? All of those surveys, all 10,000 of those surveys were a success. Did they do shit with them? No, therefore they're not a success, right? But it's 2 different metrics. What I want is for you to be able to collect data that Formula 1 can go, oh, fans, that's what you're talking about. This is great. We're going to make these changes, because you shouldn't ask a question if you aren't going to make a change based on that question. Otherwise, you're just wasting everybody's time.
Right.
And so there are other reasons, there are PR reasons why they ask those surveys, right? It makes us feel like we're contributing or not. But I think it's the same idea that like they could say, but we have passing, and it doesn't matter if it's crappy passing, but we have passing, and that's their marker of success. And it's different than what Anorex would want. I mean, that's why we're excited about the rule change. And, we just want some actual cars racing instead of, woo, wizardry making it happen. Right. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I am the wrong person to ask about that, because
you're not Adrian Newey. I mean, like, you don't know these answers.
No. What I was saying is I've been saying ever since these constructs came out, and everybody said, we've got it. I want passing and I have been anti that from the very beginning.
I just
because and we've talked about this for 10 years or more.
For sure.
And I said, Formula One is not NASCAR. NASCAR has a lot of passing, 500 laps. I get it. It's part of the fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. Formula One is not that, right?
Right.
And the only pass that matters in Formula One is the last pass, right? And so from my perspective, Alonso and Lewis at the last Grand Prix, that would have went on many more laps had there not been DRS.
Right.
And that was entertaining as hell.
For sure. I think that, and I've certainly used this analogy in the past, is that there's a whole wide range of beers that exist, right? Corona and Guinness exist in the same world. Sometimes it's hot as hell and you're just sitting out on somebody's porch and a Corona tastes great, right? Because it's hot. And a Guinness would be terrible in that situation. But sometimes you're like hanging out and you're in a bar somewhere and one Guinness just sounds delicious and that's what you want. NASCAR and Formula One can exist, but don't try to make Formula One into Corona, and don't try to make NASCAR into Guinness. Like,
right.
This is why you have this whole swath of different forms of rally cars or motorcycles, or even within a discipline, right? Like the different permutations of any of these. That's why they all exist. Formula One, I always like it for its strategy. This is why I always push that. Like, we had that podcast of what would you change? I bring back refueling, because I think that adds that strategic element that makes, the pre-race conversation with Steve Matchett interesting, because it's so, especially a lot of tracks is like, oh, everybody's going to go on mediums and then they'll go on softs and we'll finish the race. Yay. You know what I mean? Like, there's no interest to me in that. I really want to see what somebody's going to do. And some part of that is the refueling strategy.
Yeah. You could short fuel them, run quick. You're running light. Schumacher did that and stopped multiple times during a race and won, but it was a brilliant strategy.
Yeah. And I think some of it is marketing, because I think the other thing too is that people go, well, they only win from the undercut. Okay. But here, let me tell you why that is a great, you know what I mean? Like, that's the strategy of it and why that's important and why that's interesting. And if you just want to drink your Corona, go for it. I drink Corona too, but that's fine. Then stop, stop yucking on my yums, right? Like, I want to drink this Guinness. If it's not for you, it's not for you, but don't tell me it's terrible all the time.
Right.
Go drink your Corona.
Right. And Formula One has never been about prolific passing.
No, but they're great when they happen, right?
But like, when they happen, they're epic. They typically are, and they're great moves. And and so, what I think they're trying to achieve with the new regulations is to allow the cars to race close together. And I am all for that, folks. Don't get me wrong. That is the problem, which sort of prevents any sort of real organic passing. It's because the cars can't get remotely close to each other. Now, if that happens, then you hopefully will see more passing. Won't need DRS. But as it is, apparently they're going to have DRS on the new cars. I liked your idea, Grace. Let's just run a few races without using it. Go ahead and build it in, design it for your car, for your wing. Just assume we're going to have it. But let's try a few races without it and just see how we get on with it. All right.
And I'm sure there's certain tracks, right? Like, I don't think you could just do straight up the first 5, right? Like, it's more useful at some tracks than at others. So there's probably something more nuanced than just the first 5, but that's the idea. But I think, like when they put the camera mounts on top of the roll hoop, right? Everybody has a camera, even if they aren't used, because everybody's car has to weigh the same. Like, you all have to have the same weight penalty, if you will. So if everybody puts DRS on their cars and we just don't enable it, then you're all in the same boat.
Yeah,
and
right.
we would be able to assess it.
Right.
And pick those tracks. I mean, it's just like the sprint races. Like that's not something you could, if Formula One continued that, you wouldn't want that at every track. It's not going to work at every track. So you would have to, people smarter than I am, the Adrian Newey's of the world can figure out which tracks that would be useful to try it and which ones it wasn't. And maybe that is something that some tracks need and other tracks don't need. I don't know, but I'm with you. To me, DRS has always been a band-aid on a flesh wound. They have a problem. They couldn't figure out how to solve it. So we threw DRS on there as a band-aid. But what we all really want is organic passing, like you said.
Right.
So I agree with you. So if the whole point of these rules, Ross Braun promised us the whole point of these rules.
That's right.
So we could have organic passing. And so if Ross Braun failed, we're all going to be mad and we'll have to use DRS again.
That's right. Well, that's what Ross said.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Yeah, that's
Ross Braun also thinks that if you run your Ferrari backwards, it'll take the mileage off.
Right. Ferrari, California.
Yes.
Yes. Let's see. Oh, this just in. Straight out of Zandvoort. Yep. The Dutch Grand Prix is still on target, folks. The Dutch Grand Prix, which was postponed from May until September in hopes of getting a much larger turnout. Well, that race is still slated to go ahead, but the government has placed COVID-19 restrictions limiting attendance to 70,000 per day instead of the desired 105,000 plus they were hoping for. They were like,
hey, what happened?
Yeah. So now
we'll call it the Delta Grand Prix.
Yeah, right. So now they've cut the attendance down to 70K, but it's still going to go forward. This is Hat Tip Motorsport sporting director Jan Lammers. You remember Jan Lammers?
We're tight.
Like this, Jan and I. Sporting director Jan Lammers acknowledged that the current situation is not as Zandvoort wanted the first Grand Prix in 36 years to be, but is happy that the event can go ahead. Quote, for me, the glass is 2/3 full.
Okay.
I don't know, I was told there would be no math.
Yeah. That's not a saying. That's not a thing.
Yeah, the glass is two. Was the glass is 2 and 9/16 full.
This little line right here. Yeah.
Yeah. And wait a minute, Jan, you're European. What do you should be doing in metric? Okay. Well, there's all kinds of things wrong with that. Okay. Anyway, we're just going to do it. The three companies behind the Dutch Grand Prix, Circuit Zandvoort, Sport Vibes, and TIG Sports have decided to invest in the future of F1 in the Netherlands.
Sports Vibes totally sounds like a bar.
It does. Sports Vibes.
Like an ESPN, Million TV, Buffalo Wild Wings.
You want some shrimp shooters, pizza poppers? Yeah, I do. Yes, Sport Vibes. The belief is the ambition to organize the biggest ultimate race festival in the world remains the primary goal for the coming years. This year, admittedly, it's a bit more modest form, but despite that, the battle for the world championship will be fought in a beautiful orange ambiance. I was
going to say, there'll be just as much of the damn orange smoke, I'm sure. Like you're a bunch of Rossi fans in the stands, right?
Yes.
Whether there's 4 of you or 7,000 of you, there will still be tons of orange smoke, I'm sure.
Yes.
They'll have that covered.
There'll be lots of folks.
The little tote they give you when you come into the racetrack, right?
Yeah.
Here's your smoke bomb. I mean, just have the race. Who knows, right? I think at this point, I would just do it, right? Like there's too much planning.
That's what he said. Yeah, we're just going to do it.
Just do it because otherwise, right? Who knows, right? Don't wait another year. It's Max. Do it.
You got to do it. You got to do it for Max.
And it's a pretty fun track. I think we're all really looking forward to it because it's very different than any of the other tracks on the calendar. So let's just get there.
And it's in the Netherlands, for crying out loud.
Right. So
what's not to love?
I don't know. Let's give it a try. And I agree. Like, just go. Don't postpone it anymore. Don't wait another year. Just go.
I agree. Let's just go.
Let's go. Give everybody some orange masks with their orange smoke bombs and go for it.
Yep. Hey, we have talked about this in the past. It came up in a podcast. We were talking about Red Bull was talking about how much their crash cost them. Mercedes had mentioned how much a recent crash cost them for front wing. There were some Ferrari was bemoaning the fact that the Bottas hitting Leclerc cost them $2.5 million in crash damage, and that was going to be a real problem. And this led to some people saying, "Oh, boo-hoo, these teams have spent that kind of money, and now they're whining about the money and blah blah blah."
Right.
I totally understand why you say that. And I totally get it, because in the past, you're talking about a team that spends $300-400 million on this program. Okay, it's why they're called the haves and the have yachts, right?
Right.
So anyway, and I get it. I get that sentiment. But keep in mind what we said at the time when we brought this story up, that the cost cap changes that, folks. And this is why you're going to have the top teams bemoaning the fact of crash damage. Now, I was reading over at Motorsport. I thought Jonathan Noble did a great job of sort of crafting this article that explains why cost caps and crashes are a thing. And so if you'll indulge me, I want to read Jonathan's article because I thought it did a really good job. And I'm sorry it's a little lengthy, but we talked about it. I had some of you reach out to me, made some comments about this. Some of you are saying, yeah, it is going to get expensive. Some of you are saying, well, they're really rich teams and they spend a lot of money on. And so I just wanted to share this with you because I think it was really important. And I think Jonathan did a great job. Here's what the article says. Heads Up Motorsport. F1's top teams have faced a big headache this year trying to cut back their spending to get below the $145 million cost cap limit that has been introduced. Both Mercedes and Red Bull talked about the pain they had to go through over the winter to lay off staff that they could no longer afford to keep. But as the season has worn on, there have been further concerns about the complication that outfits are facing when it comes to paying out for unexpected damage. Valtteri Bottas's crash at Imola prompted Mercedes to fear it would have to cut back on development updates, while Red Bull was unhappy about the $1.8 million repair bill it faced from Max Verstappen's accident at the British Grand Prix. Ferrari team principal Mattia Binotto suggested after the Hungarian Grand Prix, when Charles Leclerc was taken out by Lance Stroll at the first corner, that rivals whose drivers are guilty of causing crash should pay for any damage caused. But while not all teams are in agreement that such a scenario is realistic, Binotto thinks there are justifiable grounds for at least teams and F1's chiefs to get together and talk about it. He says that an inspection of bills from the first half of 2021 shows Ferrari has faced paying out €2.5 million, $3 million for damage, which shows the kind of leeway that has to be built into budgets nowadays for unexpected events. Quote, these overall damages, and sometimes we can damage ourselves.
Yes,
so, so these are not just other teams that damage ourselves, explained Binotto. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of discussion that if there is a crash and there is a guilty driver and you're not at fault, and you're not faulty, and if you have been damaged, then should that be exempt from the budget cap? I think it's certainly an important point, because the reason why I mentioned €2.5 million is to show that overall the damage could be significant. So should we consider a different type of regulation in those cases? I think certainly there is merit for it. I think that certainly there are no obvious solutions, but it is something that no doubt we will discuss with the FIA, F1, and the teams in the coming weeks, possibly to address it, to see if there's any solution for the future, end quote. And this is Jonathan again. He says, beyond the damage cost, there's also a fresh debate about whether teams should face exemption from grid penalties if they suffer engine damage as a result of another driver's actions and are forced to take a fresh power unit. Leclerc lost his second power unit of the year after he was wiped out by out-of-control Stroll at the first corner of the Hungarian Grand Prix. Binotto thinks there are grounds to discuss a potential change here too, even though it would be very complicated to sort out. He said, quote, "There is no obvious solution. If we damage an engine, as in the case of Hungary, it was an engine that still had its intended usage, but was not new. By replacing it, you fit something new so you don't do it with something of equal mileage and the same lifespan. So it's complicated. There is talk of a further reduction in 2025 of moving from 3 engines to 2 per season. So it is clear that fewer engines there are, the more important the issue becomes. We will discuss with all the other teams in the FIA because this is certainly a current issue brought to light from several sources, and therefore it deserves to be explored. But I don't think there is an easy solution," end quote. So interesting story by that Jonathan penned there at Motorsport. I think it does a good job of explaining why Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes are concerned over this, because the operating cost of a team and the budget cap are linked, but in some cases they're suggesting that perhaps they should not be when the expenses incurred are out of your control or not of your own doing. And so this becomes a bit of an issue. And then it's prompted them to, for the first time I can recall this conversation publicly, to start questioning the whole engine penalty thing. Well, if someone hits our car and ruins our gearbox, we have to change it because someone else's fault. Now we're taking the penalty for the gearbox change, right? And that's not fair. And so now we're down into parsing out what's fair and what's not, and who renders judgment on who is to blame,
Right.
who gets the punitive action, who doesn't, who's justified in overage in expenditures. This starts to get to be a pretty convoluted thing, Grace.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of emails involved.
Yeah.
So I think that, so first of all, I think people, right? So I work for the federal government and people get very into how much things cost. It's all relative. And so, right, to us as regular old people, oh, $3 million, you know what I mean? Like, I get it, that's your initial reaction to these costs that are being put out there by these teams, but it's relative, right? And so don't get sucked into that, right? Like, you have to look at how much each team is paying relative to each other's team, not how much I would think is a lot or not a lot, because I'm not living on that level, right? So I think that's the first thing. Then I think that, boy, this gets murky real quick, because who's going to make these decisions, right? Because we already saw, like, how long do we have to listen to Christian Horner talking about the incident between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton at Silverstone? He's probably still talking about it. He's probably on his break wherever he is at a Spice Girl concert, and he's still just talking to random people in line, getting a beer, going, you know how much that crash cost us? Lewis Hamilton should have to pay for it. It was his fault. Why? Like, he's probably still going on about it, right? So, and I understand why he is. He has to, right? That's part of his job, because this is exactly why, just like Bernardo was saying. So I just don't know who's going to be the arbitrator of that, because, you know, I mean, that's the way I read this. So I stick with that, because we've all hashed that to death. But, like, I feel it was a racing incident, even though Lewis was at fault, right? Like, we can't get into this place of everything. It already is in that place. Do we really need it more in that place? Because now everybody's dollars, like, oh my gosh. Like, I just think, I don't know who's going to make those decisions. I don't know. I just think they need to come up with something. This is kind of like the opposite of the last story with the DRS. Like, yeah, let's try these things. See how this works. This is nutso. And I get it, because it's money. And so, of course, it's going to be nutso, but I don't know how Michael Massey would deal with this. I don't know who makes these decisions that says, well,
who's the
racing
arbiter?
Incident. Who pays for it?
Yeah.
Most of these things are a racing incident. Very rarely is it Valtteri Bottas drove into Max Verstappen, right? Like, very rarely is that the case. And the teams are never now it's just going to be even worse, right? Because the drivers already try to not blame themselves, because that's bad for their narrative, right? If I come on all the time, I mean, look, right, we all joke about Leclerc is I'm stupid did that again, right? That's going to stick with him for the rest of his life, because he honestly just said, my bad, my mistake, I'm stupid. You can't say that, because people will never let you off the hook if you admit you did something stupid and you crashed the car, right? Even though we all rate Leclerc very high as a driver, right?
Sure.
Now, could you imagine if you were not somebody who was rated as high? That narrative will never go away. So drivers are never going to say it was my fault.
Right.
And you don't make it to this level of a sport unless you have an immense ego, right? Because if you don't, and this is true of all athletes at this level, whether it's the NFL or soccer, whatever, you have to believe in yourself. You always have to bet on yourself, because you won't survive. I am not that. I don't have that kind of a personality. So it does come off as arrogant, because they have to be, because they've gone through struggles that I don't have to go through to do my job. They have to believe in themselves, right? That's the only way they're going to make it. So now you're just going to have more drivers and team principals just go, we'll just see what Michael says. That's all you're going to get from anybody. Nobody's going to give you any nuggets. Nobody's going to. So poor Lawrence Beretta is going to be like, well, George Russell, how was your race? I don't know. We'll just have to wait to see how Michael goes. Who wants those interviews? Those are going to be great, because every word you say, because we talked about that Silverstone. At first, Lewis was like, I was in front of him. No, just we were beside each other, right? Like, you pull back on that real quick, because if I was in front of him, that's a very different thing than if we were beside each other racing for position. So it's just, I just think I agree, something needs to be done about it. But I just think trying to make this like a new thing that race stewards or the FIA or somebody, or, Dominicali, I don't know, is going to have to decide who pays these things. That's just going to be
it's interesting too. I think I don't want to overthink this and imply something that's not true.
We're here.
But it just seems like indicative of the state of the world these days anyway. It's like, who was calling on David Coulthard and McLaren to foot the bill for Spa 98?
I knew this was coming.
Who was saying that? What team boss has said, oh my gosh, I got to rebuild the car. I got to use the T card. I got to build this. It's going to cost us, $2 million. Who is asking that Ron Dennis picked up the bill, and because David Coulthard caused it, and no one. But
does. Michael was the one that couldn't see. Why is it David Coulthard's fault?
No, I'm talking about at the beginning.
Oh, well, yes, because he took out 13 cars.
He took out the whole field. Yeah. So, So
then incident, right.
Yeah. So you've got those situations, and now we're going to start parsing out every incident and assigning or apportioning blame. And then what do we get into? Well, it was a 60-40 deal. So you pick up 60, this is a very difficult concept that is being driven by, and this is what the teams are so good at too. Let's be honest. The teams are great at taking an FIA regulation where the FIA thinks they're being clever and coming out with a regulation, and the teams take that regulation and ram it so far up the FIA's backside they can taste it, right?
Yep.
And that's just what the teams do. They make the FIA pay for the regulatory box that the FIA puts them in. And they just do this. And now they're going to say, no, you have the cost cap, can't afford to put on new wings because so-and-so ran into our car. Wasn't our fault. Can't afford to put a new gearbox in because so-and-so hit us. You've got us locked down to 3, can't do it. So somebody's got to pay for this. We shouldn't get penalties for that. This is the kind of thing that you're going to see going on now. The tighter and tighter the regulations, the more you're going to start seeing this.
I agree with all of that. And I think I just wanted to add the other thing that is always makes these decisions complicated is that you can never measure intent, only outcomes.
Yep.
And so that was, what I mean? So that's why things just become racing incidents. First of all, nobody, I always think of like all the trickery that Michael Schumacher used to always pull. And I always refer to it as his Rascast brain. Like, he didn't wake up in the morning and go, I know what I'm going to do. During qualifying, I'm going to pull off in Rascast. I'm going to totally screw Alonso's lap so that he can't get pole. That is not how he started his day. It was in that moment he thought, I'm going to try this, right? Which is what makes him great. And so I think that's the thing, is that we never know somebody's intent. We never know if they meant to do it. Also, we can look at his outcomes. And so you can't really say, well, the outcome of Lewis taking out Max just cost Red Bull a lot of money, and so therefore Mercedes should pay for it. No, well, that can't be it either. So I just think, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe the teams thought that this was just like a joke, like a Bernie Ecclestone kind of, we're going to do this thing. And then it's like when you ignore that email, right? Like, again, you get that email from your boss and you're like, I don't really want to do this. So I'm just going to let this email sit for a couple of days and see if anybody brings it up again. And if they never bring it up again, I'm just going to let it die on the vine, right? So maybe the teams really just kind of thought like, oh yeah, this cost cap, but it doesn't work. We'll just let it die on the vine, and we're doing it, right? That email, you really did need to pay attention to that email. And so now they're really kind of trying to figure out how that's going to work, because
well, it's a work in progress, apparently.
No other sport really has this either, right? Like, so which is what we've talked about, right? That there's so many components involved in a race team that you don't have with a football team or basketball or something like that, right? I just don't know where you draw that line. And that, we joke like everybody will just pay more on their catering, right?
Right.
They're still going to spend their money wherever they can, and they'll figure out some way. The catering built the new nose cone.
Yeah, right.
It's fine. Don't you know, we hire engineers to do our catering now. So I don't know. I just think this is also going back to the story about DRS. This is not what people want to hear about either. Not any more than they want to hear about tires, right? Like,
no.
Who wants to have this argument come out of everything?
Yeah, I don't think fans want to see teams,
nobody cares.
Sit around and
figure it out
and moan, and and then so-and-so's got to pay for so-and-so's wing, and then we got to know. And, the easiest way is to say, okay, well, you're paying for it all. Now, if it wasn't your fault, then maybe we'll keep that outside of the cost cap. But, then again, that's, I don't know, slippery slope. Anyway.
I don't know. I just think they got, half a season, quarter of a season left, but 2/3 of a glass full. They better figure this out, because it's coming quick.
Yeah, agreed. All right, it's time for Albon's Cats. What mysterious fun things has Grace found this week to put in the Albon's Cats section? All right, Grace, what do you got for us?
So first, I wanted to give a slight shout out to the city of Milwaukee, because I'm very down on the city of Indianapolis. But now, having been to Milwaukee, which is also very near Chicago, Indianapolis really has no excuses, and they just need to pick it up, right? Like, I don't know, Indianapolis, get some fun stuff to do, because Milwaukee's figured it out. You can too. So Indianapolis, I expect better. I'm not okay with you being the alpha of the city, of the Midwestern cities. St. Louis has stuff to do. I've been there. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Come on, Indianapolis. Pick it up. You ain't got a lot of stuff to do.
That's right.
You could do better. Milwaukee was lovely. So I think this is really, if you're new to the show, or you just never listen to anything I tell you, even though everything I tell you, you should listen to, why aren't you watching MotoGP? What have you been doing with the last 2 weeks of your life? You just missed 2 great races back to back at Austria, the Red Bull Ring, the A1 Ring, as I still like to refer to it, because I'm old school like that. But I think that you're really missing out. There's some really great stuff going on over there. And then the whole Maverick Vinales, like, I don't know. And then I was, Matt Oxley. I was like, who wrote this story? Talked about how him blowing up the engine on purpose wasn't a big deal. Well, the team isn't letting him race. So I think they thought it was a big deal. Even if you don't think personally it was a big deal, because he kind of took the Cam Newton approach of like, well, he's a really passionate player. So sometimes that spills off on the sidelines, and he's going to kick the little net thing, and it's going to fall on his head. And we all laughed at him, but he's a passionate player, and we should support that. And it's like, well, nobody else seems to be doing these things, because all his examples were like Kevin Schwantzer earlier. Like, that wasn't yesterday. And, and so it's just like, no, I don't think that's acceptable. And clearly the people he works for didn't think it was acceptable either. And he's not racing for them, and he's signed on to a new team. So I don't know. I stepped away for 5 days to go to a wedding, and all kinds of crap blew up in MotoGP. But bringing it back around, that old guy, Bernie Eccleston, may be onto something. Those sprinklers might really come in handy. Nothing like a wet race where half the drivers come in, because in MotoGP, you switch bikes, right? You switch whole new bikes with the rain setup. So half the front of the field comes in, guy number 5 doesn't come in, and Bins ends up winning the race and he's out there on the slicks, just like, please don't crash, going really slow, because he shouldn't be. He should be on rain tires. And, and then when you saw Pecco go out and he's on rain tires and he's just picking them off like ducks, right? Because he's on the right tire for the conditions, and he would have won the race if they had at least one more lap, but they didn't. So Binder won, but I was great. And so I just think, God damn, Bernie Eccleston, God damn it, that guy.
He knew.
Might be on something. Might be just
He
random.
knew.
And I do think, I mean, this comes up in Formula One too, but we talk about how in Spa, right, that it can be raining on one part of the track and dry on the other part. Well, they keep talking about the microclimate of Austria and the A1 track, right? The microclimate, right?
The microclimate, I remember
also that. In the mountains, right? Which is the same thing of the Ardennes Forest, right? So I was just waiting for somebody to say, well, at the A1 ring, it can be raining on one part of the track and not the other, because it's a microclimate here and everything is different. So, but it was a good race. So if you're new to MotoGP and you want some exciting racing to watch, definitely watch the second, because the back-to-backs. Watch the second race in Austria that they just had. The first one was really good too, and also had a rookie win. So, and KTM won the second race, which that's their home track. And
it was a KTM one too, and that's their home race. Yeah.
KTM doesn't win shit, so that's always great.
Yeah, that was great.
Like that,
Yeah,
and it's like Renault winning.
Rossi got P8 and was looking like he might get a podium. So
I mean, there for a moment, I think you're right. We all collectively held our breath, like, yeah, Rossi, like, because they have to. This is all right. I'm going to put this out there. If you're ever in a position to retire from something like racing, wait till the end of the season. If I have to hear for the next 10 races, this is Rossi's last Silverstone. This is Rossi's last. All right, we're already sad enough. Do you have to keep bringing it up that this is his last whatever for the next 10 races? We get it. He's retiring. We're sad. Stop bringing it up. Everything's his last thing.
I'm so torn on that too, because then there's been times where they go through a whole normal season, you don't really think much about it, and then they say, oh yeah, that's his last race, he's going to retire.
You're like,
well, nobody got to say goodbye. And, had I known, it's kind of like, with Kimi right now, nobody knows what he's going to do, but no, this could be his last season and people want to go and see Kimi race one more time, He's
just not going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Kimi's just going to be like, oh, I retired.
Right.
You didn't get the Post-it note?
Yeah.
I'm not coming back.
I sent you a card, or my wife did, I guess.
I don't know, something. You're right. I mean, that's a fair point too, right? That, you want that ability to enjoy it.
It's closure, Grace. It's closure.
It is, but they mention it almost as much as it rains on part of the track and not on the other part of the track. Just then say it once and let's move on, right? It's a I mean, it's time. I totally back that, but I was also hoping to get to see him race again. So
well, my Alvin's cat was Daniel Ricciardo's very nice tribute to Rossi on his Instagram. It was really nice. He had this picture when Valley was young, and he just kind of an ode to Rossi, and talked about what he meant to the sport and how he made it exciting. It was just a real nice touch by Dan. I thought it was a good job. Yeah,
I agree. And so,
all right,
yeah, and so go watch some MotoGP. It's really Quartararo will probably get the championship, but everything else is still in the works, and it's interesting. And see Valentino Rossi before he retires from MotoGP. I agree that I'm sure he'll do something else. I'm sure this is not the last time we'll get to see him race, but
I hope he does.
Yeah,
he's awesome.
He's still got a lot in him.
All right. Well, that does it for this episode. That's what we think about this week's news. But you can tell us what you think about this week's news if you go to theparcfermé.com. Share your opinions, just do it with decorum and civility. And if you like this podcast, go over to iTunes, give us a good rating, give us a little love over there. Huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. And I say this every week because I absolutely mean it. that we could not and would not do this podcast without you. So if you are not currently a Patreon supporter of this show, then please find someone that is and pat them on the back, because it is because of they that this show exists. So, and if you are feeling so compelled, you can go to the parcfermé.com. On the right-hand side, it says support us. You can click on that link and support us through Patreon or, PayPal or whatever you want to support us by. So thank you. Huge gratitude to our Patreon supporters. And with that, we will be back next week to do it all over again. And who knows, maybe there'll be another video from Paul and team. If so, I'll link it. But until next week, when we come back to do it all over again, this is Todd, aka Negative Camera, saying so long, Grace.
See you in another week.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.